If you work in IT service provider, I guarantee, just based on our big client base among MSPs, that you do have the right talent and you don't need to hire anyone to do this type of work.
All right. So like I said, my name is Kendall Matthews. I'm the head of marketing, and here is our agenda for today. We're going to go do our webinar intros and tell you who we are and why you should listen to some of the great things that we're going to be talking about, and why ElectroNeek, because that's going to be very important to understand what we are about and how we are helping lead this industry. And the content, what we're going to do is show you the live demo. So we're going to make sure that you see everything live today. So you want to stay all the way to the end, because we also have great special offers for everyone who listens all the way to the end. We have some great things for you, but we also will have that Q&A session to answer all your questions. And so this next slide, we're going to make sure that we present our speakers. So we have Dmitry Parkov. He is our Chief Product Officer and our co-founder of ElectroNeek, and Ivan Rumas, our sales engineer. So before we get into all the presentations, Dmitry, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Kendall. Thank you. I consider myself an RPA industry veteran, more than 10 years in implementing automation from biggest enterprises and biggest banks in the United States to empowering IT service providers and mid-size, sometimes even SMB companies across the world to automate their routine. This year is very exciting. I think it brings dramatic shifts to the way people think about automation, to the economics of automation. And AI is a big driver of that. So that's why we're here today, to show you a lot of things that I would myself consider unrealistic, or let's say magic, just a year ago. So my pleasure. And my colleague Ivan is spearheading a lot of our innovations in practice, applying the tools and technologies that we develop to practical business problems and processes. And exactly today, we wanted to show you many things that I think anyone can do at this moment, with some asterisks, but Ivan will show you like the magic. Let's wait for that.
Let's get for the magic. Yeah, don't stall long now. We're going to show you something special. So, Ivan, a little bit about yourself, and then we're going to go ahead and show the people what they want to see. So, go ahead, Ivan, a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Kendall. My name is Ivan Ramos, sales engineer here. I've been working around automation for the last 7 years. Started with macros, then RPA, and now AI, of course, and always trying to stay there in the bleeding edge of technology, and really excited to show you how what I really think is the future of work in general, and how you can turn very simple instructions into fully functional bots. So that's going to be the focus today. I'm really excited to show you that magic that we were discussing a moment ago, but that'll be in a couple minutes. But yeah, thank you.
There you go. All right, so we're going to go to that next slide here, and Dimitri's going to go ahead and take it away.
Before we move forward, I want to share an exciting news. Since the last time we did a public event, we have been announced among 10% of the fastest growing companies in the United States. For those of you who don't know us, we are based in Austin, Texas. We are a company of around 110 people at this moment, and we are for a bit more than 4 years in the market. And this journey proved to be quite successful. Thank you for someone to share the applause. So let's move on. So we haven't made it RPA, of course, for seeing that some of you are running RPA consultancy shops. You know that ElectroNeek is not someone who created the RPA. It's a company called Blue Prism around 20 years ago. But what we did as a group of founders, as very early team, we sit together and thought about, okay, how to make automation more accessible, more affordable. We first focused on economics model. We first focused on no-code, drag and drop. And then AI came and made everything very different. It became very fast to develop the workflows. We do have big public bot library where you can see what's being built for practical use across different departments in business. And we share the recordings of all the developments. So you can go and confirm yourself. It rarely takes more than an hour to build a good bot. And today we're going to build live a lot of things to demonstrate that magic. Maybe you're familiar with other RPA platforms. Maybe you attended many of the demos. Maybe you work on them yourselves. Quite frankly, when you show how a bot is being built, typically it's not very exciting. Typically, it's quite frankly boring. It's similar to programming, but you construct it with drag and drop. I promise today you will see something different. You will see something that actually is interesting and fun to see. And that's what we try to bring to automation. It's about people in the end of the day. It's about empowering people to think about what can be automated, It's empowering people to stand up and say, let's get this automated. And that's people building automations. And I think that last category, and many of you represent businesses or companies that do have internal teams who are doing this, is our major audience for today's show. But if you're a business owner, think about what is now possible inside your company, how it can be run very differently and efficiently. If you're a service provider, we do have a new partner program. If you haven't checked it out, it doesn't require any commitment or much investment. So from your side, if you want to start this business and pretty much be someone who builds these bots for others to make money, let's check it out. So we can say at this moment we're completely no code because AI fills in all the gaps in no code that existed before. We are much more affordable. We have unlimited attended bots, whatever, how many you want to deploy in a company, up to you. How many times you want to run them, up to you. We've been awarded pretty much every year since our inception by G2. That's where the real users share their real feedback on the platform. Recently won AI Breakthrough Award in Innovation for the application of AI and RPA. The company that won that award a few years ago is called OpenAI. That's our business partner with whom we develop some of the technology together. So without further ado, I want to open the floor for the magic show, and let's enjoy it. Thank you.
Perfect, Dimitri, thank you. Yes, we'll be actually showcasing, this is a very brief introduction to what we will be showcasing. So we'll be looking at many different features that the AI workflow generator can help you automate in your tasks. And we'll actually be doing a full demo first for a reporting automation case that will be initially built with the workflow generator. And we'll actually showcase some other AI features from the platform that will be very interesting to look at. So let's get started with that demo. Let me stop sharing my slide and we'll get started right away with the first use case. So let's minimize this and bring up our Studio Pro platform. This is where we'll be building these use cases. So first of all, we'll be working with a use case that will be reading data from an Excel file, and then it will be sending that Excel file as an email. But then actually we want to make that report a bit more interesting. We don't just want the raw data to be there. We want a more interesting summary to be created. So we'll be using more AI tools to make that look better. So our Excel file would be this. This is just a very basic list of software sales for some different software products. And we have, as you can see, the quarter sales and the previous quarter sales. So we have data that we can compare for both. So we have this file with the sales spreadsheet. And actually, we can look at how would we break down this process. Let's look at the following slide. This is how, if we would start developing this process or actually just doing it manually, these are the steps that we would follow for that process. So first, we would want to read that Excel file so we know its content. Then let's say we want to actually send an email with that Excel data. And then at the end, just to notify the end of that process, let's say we just want to show some sort of a message or a console log so that we know the process is over. So these steps can actually be translated into natural language. So just like this, with the contents of an Excel file, then send an email with the data from that file in the email body, and then finally send a console log indicating that the process is done. That's simply a description of the steps that we just discussed, but that's how we actually build our prompt for the AI workflow generator in ElectroNeek. So in the next slide, we actually have our prompt already. So we can just copy and paste this right away into our workflow generator. And with that, we can generate the full structure of our workflow. We can do that by clicking right here in where it says Create New with AI in the home screen of our Studio Pro. And then we can paste that prompt that we just created. And then we have two options. We can create a new file with that prompt or with the workflow created from that prompt, or we can just simply add it to the canvas so that we can start looking at it and customizing it if we need to. So in this case, we'll do that. And we will click on the build workflow button. So with this prompt, it will only take a couple of seconds for the workflow to be generated. And here we have it. So we can look at here in the console, we can see the prompt itself that we use. So if we want to iterate on it or we want to save it somewhere, we have that as well. And right here, we can see the steps that were generated for this workflow. So first of all, just like we told it, It's reading an Excel file. Of course, it still doesn't know what the Excel file is, so we need to point to it. It just knows that it needs to work with an Excel file, but so it just puts a placeholder right here. In my case, of course, I know where it is, so I will just pick it and grab it from the desktop right here. The sheet name, of course, is just assumed a generic sheet name, but in our case, it's called sales. Then it's saving the data of that Excel file into a variable right here. And then it's automatically adding an activity to send an email with that data. Of course, I didn't specify which email account I wanted to use. Sorry, my apologies. I mean, I have a small gray box right here. I'm not seeing it on my screen. I don't know if that's currently. I can try not sharing for a second and then sharing again, so we can make sure that gets fixed.
Take that one. Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. My apologies. I'm not seeing it on my screen, so please let me know if that's still a problem. Hopefully, it's not.
Let's go.
Yeah, it should not be. Let me know if hopefully that gets fixed. I'm not seeing that on my screen, so I'm not sure what's causing it. But let's move forward. I will be explaining everything that will be happening. And yes, it should not be blocking anything very important. Mostly what we need to see is right here in the middle in the canvas. And as we can see, we have the steps lined out. We have the read Excel, saving that, and then we have the send email. And send email, of course, we didn't specify what exactly where we want to send an email or anything. So we just filled that out with placeholder information. For example, the email account is a very clear example. And then the subject is also auto-generated. And then the email body is, of course, including the data from that Excel file. So for this use case, this would be enough. This would be all. In fact, we actually have at the end the console log just informing that the process is over. So that's also something that we specified. But this is a very simple and very not very user-friendly or final and user-friendly case because it's just showing the Excel data. So let's actually bring in more AI, more intelligence into the case so we can generate a small summary out of this data, a very quick executive summary using AI features. And actually, we'll do something else with that information. We're going to be sending that email with that same summary in 2 languages, and we'll use more AI tools to do that. So let's actually add that step right here. We will be using our Ask AI and Edit Text activities. These are also part of our AI features within the platform. So first of all, we'll use the Ask AI feature to generate that executive summary. So we'll just add that activity right here. That activity will talk to the GPT language model, and we will send a prompt to the activity to generate that data. We can actually look at how we build that prompt right here in our slides. So we have the following structure for that slide. We first tell the AI to simulate a persona. We tell it to act as a financial analyst. That's the role that it will take to perform this analysis. Then we tell it that it will receive the following data about the product sold this quarter in comparison to the previous quarter. And we will, of course, include the actual data that it needs to perform that check. And then it will tell it that based on this data, we need to produce an executive summary of the best and worst performing products in comparison with the previous quarter, because we do have data for both quarters. And finally, in terms of formatting that output, we just need a single paragraph with that data, and that's everything that we need from the AI. So with that, we have our prompt, and we can actually use that within the Ask AI activity. So I have my prompt right here ready. I will just copy and paste it. It's the same one that we just saw, with the only difference being that in order to share the data with the AI, I put a placeholder in here so that we can replace it with the actual variable that contains the data. Of course, since this variable was generated by the workflow generator, I don't have the final name for it until it's created. So I will just copy that name and paste it right here instead of a placeholder. With that, the prompt is ready. All I will need to say is I would just want the text from this result. I don't want any of the technical details about that API call. And I want to save that result in a variable that we will call summary English, because this is just the first part of it. We want that summary, but it will be generated in English. But now we will add one more AI feature, which is the edit text activity. This is also connected to the GPT language model. And in this case, instead of just asking for a prompt and then returning an answer, we will give it some original piece of text, which was generated by the AI itself, and we will ask it to translate it to Spanish. So we will have that executive summary both in English and in Spanish. So as for the input in this activity, we just want the previous step result. That will be the summary in English. And then the instruction, this is also very simple and natural language oriented. So we just tell it that what we want is to translate this financial analysis into Spanish. That's all that we need. So we type that into the instruction field. Finally, we also make sure to mark the show text output only field. And in this case, the variable, we want to call that summary Spanish, because of course, this is the summary, but in Spanish. Perfect. And with that, we can connect it to our send email activity. And now we can actually customize the email to be exactly as we want it. We don't want to use the default data that was included. So as for the email that will be used to send that, I will select that from my credentials. And of course, my server in this case is Google. I will send that email to myself. So I will type in my own account for that. Then the subject, we can just type in something like last quarter sales analysis. And as for the body, we actually want to include both an introduction and the actual summary, and in both languages. So we first include a small introduction in English, then the summary in English, and then we want to include a small summary in Spanish, and then the actual AI-generated summary in Spanish. And we'll also finally attach that Excel file at the end so that the email itself includes that information. And perfect. With that, we can now run this workflow and we will see that email as its final result. So let me just close this Excel file and run this live so we can see the result in a couple seconds. So the bot will read that Excel file, and then it will perform the Ask AI activity to get that summary in English, and then edit text to translate that summary into Spanish. Finally, the email will be sent, and the workflow was executed successfully. And let me actually show you what that email will look like. Here it is. So as you can see, we have a small introduction in English, which was written by me, but then we have the summary, which was entirely generated by the AI. So we're not just including raw data, we're including a very useful summary with the exact information and criteria that we asked. It's telling us what was the performance of the products, which ones it had increases and which ones had decreases. And the same exact information in Spanish. An introduction created by me, and then a translation of that summary in Spanish. And then finally, we just include the actual data, the raw data in Excel, right here as an attachment. So that's a full use case. Sorry, Dimitri, but there's a full use case that takes advantage of these three features.
Thank you, Ivan. I want to point out that if you look at the timer, like it took around, I think, 8 minutes to build it all. Ivan, there was a great suggestion from Leonardo, and the suggestion is to reduce the size of the studio screen a bit, so maybe like 10-15%. So the block we have on the screen doesn't cover that one. So yes.
Perfect. Let me know if something like this works.
Yes, perfectly. Thank you so much. I think everybody would appreciate it. Thank you.
Perfect. My apologies. I really don't know what usually when I have stuff from Zoom in the screen, that it's a problem, but I don't have anything now, so that should help.
Thank you. I see questions are coming. Let's probably get to the questions once we finish the full demo, because we will see more of the workflow generator, and that's the thing what causes the most questions.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we'll now be showcasing those other features that we discussed. So, but what we will do now is we'll look at more tasks that can be performed with the AI workflow generator. So we just went through a couple of examples of things that it can do, like we worked with Excel and with email. We'll actually look at some more short examples of how we can deal with some general logic, user input requests, how it can work with system level tasks, for example, running a system command, how it can work with showing those results both on the screen and in the console, out some more Excel tasks, email tasks. We saw some of it, but we'll see more. And then some more advanced features, like, for example, working with public APIs, and then working with our IDP solution, our intelligent document processing solution, IntelliDocs. We can actually ask the AI workflow generator to include IntelliDocs into workflow, and it will do it for us. So let's jump right into that. So first, we'll look at some general and system related tasks. And first of all, we'll look at how we can get the workflow generator to ask for user input. So we'll just click the AI workflow generator button, and we'll type in a new prompt. In this case, it will be a very short prompt like this one, where we will simply ask the workflow generator to create a workflow that asks the user input for name, email, and age. And that will leverage our human in the loop activities. So let's look at that workflow. And we'll be reviewing many of these workflows. We'll see that these are very short and small, very short and sweet workflows that will get the job done. There we go. So first, in this workflow, it asks for the name with an input dialog activity right here. Then it saves that variable to that value, to a variable. Then same thing with the email, asks for it, then saves it. Then same with the age. There it goes. And finally, in this case, I didn't ask it to do anything else afterwards, but just to prepare us to do anything with that, it actually included some logic to check the age in this case. But of course, it didn't do anything after that because it didn't specify any further steps. It's not going to invent or make up a whole workflow from it, but it is ready to use with any other workflow. So that's definitely a useful part that we can bring into any other workflow. Perfect. That will be user input. Let's actually look at another case that also works with user input, but let's also include the possibility of showing the results on screen, both in a user notification and also in the console. So we see another prompt where we say that we are going to ask the user simply for their name and then show it in a user notification and finally write it to the console. So those are two different ways in which the bots can communicate the results to an end user. So let's look at that. Perfect. Took a couple seconds. And now we have the user input activity, the input dialog, where we will type in our name. Then it's going to save that name to a variable right here. Then show that name on screen. And finally, just write that name into the console. This is actually ready enough to be run, so we can execute it very quickly. And we'll see that it will perform those exact steps. So first, we'll ask for my name. So I will just type in my name right there. I click OK. And here we have the user notification letting us know that this is the name that we typed in. And if we click OK, then we can also see that that data was in the console right here. So those are two ways in which bots communicated its results. Perfect. So let's actually look at a system command now. Let's actually see how the workflow generator can understand tasks that are related to OS automation within the operating system. So let's also ask the user to input some information. In this case, it will be a URL, and we'll ask it to ping that address via a system command, and then we'll simply write the result to the console. So let's click Build Workflow and see the result. Perfect. So first we get the input dialog where we'll need to type in that URL. Then it will save that URL to a variable, and then it will automatically use the command prompt activity to understand that it needs to perform a ping with that address at the end. And then it's simply going to show that result on screen. That's why it's using the save the previous step result. It means it's going to get the result from the previous activity and show it not on screen rather, but on the console itself. So let me clear out the console. And in this case, we can also run it because it's a simple enough workflow. So in this case, the URL, let's just type in google.com. It's going to perform that ping, and then it's going to let us know how that ping went right here in the console. Here it goes. Perfect. Those are some general and system-related tasks. Let's move on to something a bit more applicable in the day-to-day, which is emails. So let's look at how a bot can understand how to read emails and send emails actually from a prompt. So let's say that next we want to have the bot read all emails that contain the word invoice in the subject, right? So this would be emails that contain an invoice, but actually we can do this just to showcase that what the workflow generator can do. Let's do it in another language this time. We can actually tell it the exact same instructions in Spanish. So we're going to simply ask it in Spanish to read all the emails from an inbox, and we want the word factura to be in the subject. That basically means invoice in Spanish. So it will understand these instructions and it will actually use the exact word that we asked it to use. So let's build that workflow. And here we go. We have the read emails activity. If we go over to the filter by content section, we'll see that in the subject contains property, it's waiting for, it's only considering emails that have the word factura on the subject, of course. So in that way, that this is a very good way of showcasing that the workflow generator is not just specifically, we're demoing a lot of English cases, but it's going to work with your language as well. And then everything else that the workflow did, of course, is just saving that value and showing it on screen on the console. But of course, in this case, we just asked for the first part. The rest was just added automatically by the generator. Then that was reading emails. Let's look at how it can also send emails. We saw that in the general example, but here we have a more complete example. We can ask it to set the path to an invoice PDF file, and then send an email informing that the payment is overdue. So in this case, we're actually telling it what we want in that email. It's not just going to be a general or generic email. And then attach that PDF file. So let's look at how that is created. It's going to take a couple seconds. And once this is done, we'll have our workflow. Perfect. So first we have the path to the file. Of course, the file itself is a placeholder. We are not using any actual files. And then we have the send email activity right here. Of course, it's not pointing to an actual email that will need to be added. But the actual subject is related to the ask that I gave it. It's payment overdue for invoice. And same thing with the body. The body is actually saying, dear customer, this is to inform you that the payment for the invoice is overdue. Please make the payment as soon as possible. Thank you. So it's actually taking into account the context of what I asked it to do, and it wrote the mail body considering that. And then as for the attachment, we can simply use the save the previous step result option. So it grabs that path that we automatically created. Of course, we would change that path to something real, and then it will already be ready to send that email. Perfect. Now let's move on to Excel tasks, tasks that involve Microsoft Excel. So we can both read and write files in Microsoft Excel with the AI workflow generator. It will generate workflows that will do those tasks for you. So for example, let's say that we wanted to read an Excel file, save its content to a variable, and then just to see that it did it, write it to the console, just to confirm that it did it successfully. So that will be our simple prompt. Let's build that. And it will include both the reading and then the writing to the console. Perfect. So in some cases, you'll notice that it will automatically include what we call exception handling or error handling. We can ask the workflow generator to include that, but if we don't, it will make that decision for us. And if you also notice that we have comments in these activities, that's a way for the workflow generator to tell us basically what it did in each one of those steps. So as for the actual logic of this workflow, we have the read Excel file right here, also, of course, with the placeholder, then saving that value to an Excel content variable, and then just showing that on the console right here. So a very simple workflow, but fully functional as well. And finally, let's try something that not only reads an Excel file, but also writes it. So let's create a new, use a new prompt right here, read an Excel file, save its contents to a variable, and then write those same contents to a new Excel file. So of course, we would want maybe to modify some values in the middle, but in this case, we just want to create a copy basically of that file. So let's create that new workflow. And in a matter of seconds, we have that. In this case, it also included some exception handling, basically just letting us know if something fails. We don't expect anything to fail here, but it's always good to consider exception handling. For example, if the Excel file didn't exist. And here we have the read Excel file for the input file right here. Then saving the results of the input file or the contents of the input file into this variable. And finally, the write Excel file activity, saving to another path, the output file. And the value itself is simply grabbing the Excel data from the previous step. So this is a very simple 3-step workflow, but fully functional as well, just like the previous ones. Finally, to wrap things up, let's actually look at 2 more advanced features that the AI workflow generator can also include in your workflows. So first, let's look at how it can interact with a public API. I actually have an example of a public API right here. This is the Open Notify API. It's a very common public API that's most related to NASA data or data from people who are in space right now or the International Space Station, just as a very quick example, where we're going to use this endpoint, which gives you information about everyone who is in space right now. So if we click on this right here, it gives us an example of what we will see. It's basically just a list of people who are in space and the number of people in general. So we actually want to get this number. So we won't need to specify the URL or the actual this is how to do that API call. Since this is a public API call, GPT will know how to interact with it, and we will just need to ask the workflow generator to include that instruction. So our prompt will be the following: use the Open Notify API to check how many people are in space right now, and then show the result on screen in a user notification. That's everything that we need to give it. And now we can build that workflow and see the results. So it will take a couple seconds as usual, and then it will generate that fully functional workflow for us. So since the Open Notify API is publicly documented, we didn't need to specify anything. If it's a more specific API, you might need to include some information. If you wanted to work with an API that's not well known to the public. In this case, we have the HTTP request activity right here that's going to be performing that request. Then the result will be saved right here. And then the final data will be shown in user notification at the end. So that's the actual steps will be performed in that same way. In some cases, you want to notice that you might be, depending on the structure of the response, you might need to customize how the data is used. For example, in this case, we don't have a data property inside that file, so we just need to remove that. But the number property is correct. That's actually inside that data. So we can actually now run this very quick example, and we will be able to see just that number on screen. So we'll see there are 13 people in space right now. And that was, of course, done by capturing the actual data that we saw on screen before. Here we have it. And then using the number property. We could also get the amount of people right here. But since the number was already available, that's what the workflow generator used. And just like that, we can work with other public APIs as well. And then finally, let's look at how it can integrate with another of our advanced features, which is the IntelliDocs IDP solution, our intelligent document processing solution. So we can actually tell the workflow generator to work with IntelliDocs. We can tell it to set the path to a PDF document and then process it using IntelliDocs. And then we want, in this case, just to write the results to a console. But of course, that's just one of many ways that you can get the end result. So let's look at how that works. And we will not only set the path to that file, which will be, of course, a placeholder, but it will also then send that data directly to IntelliDocs. So we have that path right here, and then the IntelliDocs activity, which, as you can see, has the save the previous step result option enabled. That means that it's going to take the data from the previous activity, and that's how it's going to, what it's going to use. It's just going to use the path that we set right here. Of course, if it was a URL, we could specify that. If we wanted to pick that file manually, we could. But in this case, if we wanted to be to include more steps in the initial structure of that workflow, we're good to go with the instruction just like we gave it now. So this is, I think, a very complete showcase of the many different tasks that the AI workflow generator can perform. And of course, the main goal in using the AI workflow generator is then to combine these different tasks to be able to perform a more complete workflow, a workflow that represents an actual manual process that's being carried out or something that you would like to automate in your company. These are just showcases of the different features, but what we like to say always is that our platform is a toolbox, and the different tools that you will use will, of course, depend on that use case. So this is just a showcase of some of those tools.
Thank you, Juan. So we made our strategy on AI, we call it manifesto, public this spring, and to address the question that is always in the air, hey, with this, what's the future of automation? Will people automate their own work, or there is a place for an automation developer? The answer is second one. The automation developer is someone who will drive automation moving on, but they will do it at much bigger scale, and their role is changing to prompt engineer. And it's very clear. It maybe was a bit futuristic when we said it in April in terms of prompts are everywhere. Prompts are more important than knowing how to build good drag and drop. Yes, drag and drop is required to modify, and there were some questions about like, how this workflow is generated now can modify it. The same way as other workflows being built. And in the end, you have steps of the executions connected on the canvas. So from the development perspective, it becomes prompt engineering now, not only the individual step of the automation like SKI, but an overall approach of how you generate the whole workflow, or how you generate maybe 3 workflows and combine them into one. But the profession is here. And the question, I think, is about what does it really change? It changes that now the skill set of automation developer is very different, which means there's very different career path into becoming an automation developer. I believe that if you have an IT team inside your organization, if you are a mid-market company or maybe IT-savvy small company, you do have right talent on board to use technology like this to automate everyday work. Not of the individual who will do that, but that individual will do it for their colleagues. If you work in IT service provider, I guarantee, just based on our big client base among MSPs, that you do have the right talent and you don't need to hire anyone to do this type of work. You're not going to look for RPA developer if you want to bring automation to this level in your organization. So, you're welcome. I texted that in chat when there was questions about can you do this or this or this. You can use the workflow generator outside the community version. It's integrated there. You can probably run it less times, as I remember, than in our standard client or enterprise packages, but you can give it a try. You can learn a lot of things. You can see the technology in action yourself. We also do have trainings on how to use all these features, and you can combine them. You can take community version and the free training and essentially become a certified AI prompt engineer for the RPA profession. Whatever platform you use, that I think will be a valuable skill for you to leverage in the future, and that's a certificate. Anyway, so I think we get into the point, right, where we should speak about the questions. Kendall, is it correct? Or we do have a few more slides?
Yep, so let's go to the next slide there. And perfect. Q&A time.
Perfect. So we do have Q&A functionality in the webinar itself. You can use that to ask a question. We'll make sure it's not getting lost. And let me go through the webinar chat to address some of the other questions that are already there. So we're a very small company and have high spirits to use the platform. Please do that. Again, community version can work for certain tasks depending on the volume. If you decide to scale, we will be happy to see you among our clients. We do have many companies who are quite frankly not big. Sometimes we see really in our service providers who do RPA as a service, they see interesting type of, let's say, new phase of RPA buyer, smaller company that starts its growth, that wants to automate ahead of hiring. And it's very interesting. The entrepreneur comes to a service provider with a plan to start a new business that relies, let's say, on frequently scraping data for instance, rental or e-commerce. And they ask this question to a service provider first. I'm going to build business like this. It will be an important component of that. Is it possible to automate? Because I would need to rely on this process every day for the quick execution. And always quite frequently the answer is yes. And I see that as being like new mentality of entrepreneurs, automation first. Let me not only buy the software and computers from a service provider, let me also buy the execution of business processes that I want to rely on. So severe, good luck. Daniel, workflow generator can figure out an action. Does it default to put in a flow with items subprogram? I have noticed this a lot. So you have the choice between creating a subprogram or putting this in a canvas. That's a checkbox in the workflow generator. If you have further questions, please feel free to ask them on our community forum. That's where we will see and address that if there's some challenge or something that we don't know. Okay, so for all our GPT integrations, we use 4 model. We started as earlier, but progressed towards 4. Will the bot perform pivoted aggregation of the data from Excel and generate a chart out of it? It's really hard to say for any specific use case, but I think we can find prompt that can do it. Again, I think if you're using community version, you want to specifically achieve this job, and you have any challenges, post it on the community forum. Someone may suggest a better prompt, or maybe someone in our own team will do so. There was questions about how we enter the languages. So we support all major languages for the workflow generator. The result will be workflow in English. or workflow in the version of ElectroNeek, depending if maybe your client Spanish speaking or Portuguese speaking country. That's our officially supported language versions of Studio. But for the workflow generator as an input, it could be anything, and it could be Japanese. The major question is, do you have the language skills then to operate with this workflow? Okay.
And the community version is available right now. So I saw that question, but it's available right now for you. So you can go ahead and sign up.
There was a question about, can it's possible, the question related to the first case we shown. Is it possible to use information from Excel, like differences, amounts, percentages? Yes, any kind of data manipulation. And SKI is an additional activity there, can do anything you want. Even build a table or a chart. So, okay. How big is the file that can be sent to AI for summarization? It's quite a technical question, but I think it's a big one. Ivan, do you have any insights on those?
We're not actually sending the file, but the contents of it. So really, it's a matter of it turns all the text that we're asking right there to into tokens. And I think that we need to discuss. I think the token limit, I believe right now, correct me if I'm wrong, Dimitri, but I think we have a token limit of around 600. I think, but it's related to that mostly. It's not actually grabbing the file and attaching it. We are using the contents of the file right now. That feature, the possibility of sending a file directly to OpenAI and telling it to open it is not available from their end directly. But so that we need to first read it. That's what we did in our case, and then send the contents. And then it's just a matter of how many characters that involves or how many tokens that involves.
Thank you. Tim, I understand now the question you're asking that says waitlist. So check your email. The waitlist now is less than a minute at this moment. So we had a big challenge of the demand recently. So we introduced this step. But check your email. You should have the invite link inside it right now. I don't think it takes more than a minute for it to get. We already were signed with ElectroNeek. Cool, Severe. Nice to meet you. It's our growing cohort of value-added resellers. We realized that not all companies, they need all the automation tools, and not all companies are seeking to implement internally immediately. So we want to be flexible, and that's the program where it's pretty much for any type of the service provider who believes that their clients may benefit from the automation and who don't want to, build the team up front. And that's, I think, a great way to start. Feel free to, if you're thinking about this, just feel free to talk. It doesn't, take more than 1 hour of your time to learn the whole nuances and how we want you to be successful and become an automation service provider.
I see some more questions here. So for either Ivan or Dimitri, is there a bot that can extract data from a data lake and process generate a summary out of it?
I think, Dimitri, if you want, I can answer that. I think the main thing to understand of the platform is that, as we mentioned, it's a toolbox basically, or a tool belt, and you have multiple tools to integrate and read data from basically any data source. If that's a SQL database, if it's a web interface, if it's a desktop interface, and we may not have the exact bot that does exactly what you need, but we will be glad to talk about that specific use case that you'd like to create with our team, and we can actually prove that out to you. But yeah, the question is never can we integrate with that specific system or data silo, data lake, or depending where the data is. The logic then to create that summary will be the same one here. Instead of plugging it into an Excel file, or it could be like a CSV file, a database. It could be data that we extract from a website. But the steps, we'll just need to swap out that first step, basically, with grabbing the data from another source. But the logic will be the exact same. The prompt would be the same, basically, and unless, of course, the type of summary that you want is different. You may want it to be longer, shorter, include other insights. So it's just a matter of replacing that first step. So the data source is different. And then at the end, making that prompt your own. So depending on what you need, you customize that prompt and you input it. But the steps would be basically, it would be the same kind of logic and the same type of request to the AI workflow generator if you use it, or the Studio Pro directly if you use the activities via drag and drop.
Fantastic. And could you also show this next slide that we have? Because It's easy to get in contact with us. So if you want to book a meeting with us, just go ahead and scan that QR code. And we'll also have the links available in the comments section where you can reach out to us. But we make it easy for you to connect with us as well. One of the other questions talking about, can you create workflows using data coming from SQL tables?
Yes. That's actually one more of the features that we have. So if we go to Studio Pro for 1 second here, we'll see that within the programming section, there's a whole database section that can connect natively to databases, and then we can run queries on it to modify the data on those databases or read it and then use it with other systems.
Thank you. I want to look at a few questions from the Q&A section. So, Denise, there's a question on, can the workflow generator only create tasks or it can fill in certain properties? You've seen in the demo how it creates properties. For instance, subject of the email is email properties. So you can put the path if you want in this, but typically the best practice will be to build the structure of the process and then fill in with exact paths or properties that you want to select. It also increases the reusability of this bot being run by many employees, for instance, in attended mode. Antonio, there is a question on, can this be plugged into CRM tool like ActiveCampaign? Yes, we of course integrate with CRM tools, and that's very popular use cases. I just yesterday looked at our collection of what bots do in Salesforce, and actually our own Salesforce. There's a lot of information there that can be used for performance management, for Nexus text determination based on the client location and so on. And this data sits in Salesforce, so we drag it from there to further manipulate and create certain outcomes. Then is a question on their languages. AI workflow generator works in many languages, so I think we addressed this. So what do we also have? MS Graph API support is any other API integration. Yes. How AI Builder works with that, I haven't tried personally, but even if it does not, you can always add one activity to make this API call and then use the workflow generator to leverage the output of this API call or to create the call itself. The model of MS SharePoint or MS OneDrive. That's a good question. I don't think so. We do have pretty extensive suite of tools to work with Microsoft ecosystem, but I'm not sure about OneDrive specifically. We'd like to use it for marketing automation. Yes, we use it for marketing automations a lot, specifically working with cohorts on data from CRM. We use HubSpot and Salesforce while they talk to each other, of course. Well, there's still integration capabilities can be better, and that's where the bots come in and they help a lot. And also, if your marketing campaigns involve actions doing on different websites, that's very good case because you don't have any alternative than RPA to do that. There's a great question about, can this integrate with projects and project management tools? I think like Jira 365, PPM. The answer is yes, and we actually understand that this is very interesting and preferred way for many businesses to execute automation processes. To have a table where the task can be a human task, can be an automation task. And you can see the stages of how it goes in the project management view, either as a table or a Kanban. Let me make a small preview. We're building such to ourselves, not an integration with Jira. This you can do today, but we're building the tool where you first design the process and then assign each step to either a bot in integration or a human. And you create interfaces for humans to provide their input or what steps they need to do. And then you pretty much see how the process runs through this, how it's being executed. We call this Process Hub. It will be online in our winter release. But thank you for asking, Leonardo. That's very interesting. For me personally, it was a discovery that project management tools are so good base for pretty much putting all the processes together and monitoring them there.
Wonderful. Yes. Go ahead and test the community version. That's perfect. Well, we've answered a lot of the questions. And of course, if you have more, you can go ahead and scan the QR code or visit us at ElectroNeek.com. And we are here to serve and help you with our guides and all the business processes that you have. So that's what we're here for. So, Dimitri, Ivan, we want to thank you both for presenting today. Great job. And everyone, thank you for attending. So we will be receiving some more great information up in the next couple of weeks. So make sure you are subscribed to our newsletters and subscribe to the great things that we're doing here at ElectroNeek. And happy automation. We'll talk to you soon.